from your situation now as well, and then thinking, okay, so what advice obviously would you pass on to others? And are things different from when you started? And if they're not, what do you think needs to change? And what advice can you give to those coming through?
God, there's so much in there.
yeah. That's the point. That's the point. But I want you. That's what we want you to say these things. We want you to share these things because it's not a small subject at all. You know what I mean? But
I mean, I think that question about Black Enough is something that resonated with me a lot growing up. I grew up in Pinner, which if you know in Pinner it's Harrow, and back then it was a very sort of white middle class area. And so going to music school and playing the violin and being one of the only Black kids there, when I went back to like my friends in Brent, family in Brent, I'd always be like the odd one out because you play the violin, and what Black people play the violin. It was this whole thing.
Yeah.
Even down to the way that I speak as well.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
well spoken, apparently. You're not quite Black enough. And it was always like that. And it was interesting actually when on my journey, so as I mentioned, I worked at the Arts Council for 7 years. And my brother is 7 years younger than me. And I will never forget, so he was doing his thing sort of late teens, which was just, hanging out with the man them, not really kind of being on a party. And me saying to him, what do you want to do with your life? And, him having some people around him that had particular views. Yeah. And I said to him, look, you need to come in to work with me and just just do some work experience, just do something. And I remember we had as a project I was working on called Creative Partnerships, which was around creativity and education. And we were working predominantly with the boroughs of Brent, Ealing and Hammersmith and Fulham. And as a small team, we were really, really, our focus was on looking at the demographics in those areas and making sure that artists that we were taking into the space were representative of that demographic. Right. So when we were working with Brent, as an example, we would make sure we were sending Black male artists into the space. And that was coming from the young people as well. So I remember we had our office in Shepherd's Bush. My brother came in and he said he didn't even recognise me. He said, I walked past and I just saw this Black girl looking at the desk, looking stush. And then I walked back and I realised it was you. And I was like, well, why was I looking stush? Because I was working? Because I was like what was So anyway, he came in, he did a couple of weeks of work experience with us, just coming to events and just being in the space, just coming, sitting in meetings. That moment has completely changed his whole life. He now is a Black business owner. There you go. He puts it back to, he will always say, you know what, you were the one that kind of took me, showed me how to operate in a different way. Yeah. And I was like, all that time when you were laughing at me, calling me, now you walk in those, and he said, well, yeah, you had to show me. So, that was a little bit of me wanting to kind of talk about this idea of not being Black enough, because we know that being Black isn't a monolith. And so when it comes to your own people, it's even more hurtful. When it comes from family, it's hurtful until they step into that lens and actually, this is where you're right. There's something in this. But the arts and culture sector is changing. Okay. But in my journey, it wasn't. When I worked at the Arts Council, it was very much the art form departments were white middle class, and the support services were not. That's where you would find the diversity, HR, payroll, that's where you'll find or children. Yeah, of course, that's where you find the black people working. But within that, there were a couple of shining lights of people that had broken through. So Hilary Carty, she's the director of Claw Leadership now, but when I worked at the Arts Council, she was director of dance. To see this Black woman being the director of that art form, that for me, so Hilary is a dear friend of mine now. That was this is where I want to be. There's role models like that helped push me. Delia Barker, who is managing director of Brixton House now, she was in the dance department. These are we call ourselves the Black superhero team. But these were the ladies that kind of really helped me realise that, there's not many of us, but there is a way to sort of push through. I'm the head of culture at Camden Council, as I said. Across London, there are not many head of culture roles, but of them, I think I'm the only Black woman that is leading a culture department. I don't think there were any Black men. Really? And so for me, that's a massive thing for me. And at times, there's been a bit of imposter syndrome. Yeah, of course. But equally, I really feel that this is a privilege for me to be in this world, and I'm not going to be here forever. So my part of my succession planning is how am I looking and supporting that next generation, and how am I being visible enough for people to see that
Right.
Yeah.
you can